At a time when the magazine industry faces an uncertain future, Dennis Publishing is thriving. 4 years ago, British publisher Felix Dennis brought Maxim, the leader of the so-called laddie mag industry in the United Kingdom. He brought it to the United States. The magazine, with the beer and babes philosophy, has gone on to become the #1 men's lifestyle publication in the States, with a circulation of 2.5 million readers. Dennis is a 30-year veteran of the industry who first came to notorious fame when he was jailed in 1971 on obscenity charges for publishing the underground magazine Oz. Today, his global media empire is constantly growing with the recent U.S. launches of the music publication Blender and the news weekly The Week. I'm pleased to have him on this broadcast for the very first time. I like this magazine.
You like The Week, John?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Out of all the magazines that I publish and have published in 30 years, the only magazine that I'm absolutely certain will outlive me long, long after I'm dead is The Week.
Why is that?
I think, to be very honest with you, it's the best thing I've ever done. I think there's a huge need for a filter for all the information that people have to deal with. You know, there's just so much information, they just cannot read all the newspapers.
Let me tell you, I swear to you, this is an honest story. I'm in London.
Right.
Before you brought this to the United States. This magazine is in the back seat of the car that I'm riding in.
Okay.
I pick it up, you know, because I'm always thinking about television programs.
All right.
And I say, here is a television program.
Right.
Here is a television program.
And I think you're right.
You know? So I'm doing it, and I'm calling it The Week.
Well, that's okay. I'll send the lawyers around. I would love you to do The Week.
We will. We'll do it together.
I'll tell you, I would love to do The Week with you.
It is a great magazine.
Could I just tell people what it's about?
Yes, please do.
Basically, it's got a line on the front that tells you what it's about. It says all you need to know about everything that matters. And what we do is we create 40 pages of magazine, of which only 6 are allowed to be ads. We limit the amount of advertising, and we're the only magazine, as far as we know, in America that actually does that. We condense the news stories from literally hundreds and hundreds of newspapers around the world, obviously mostly in the United States of America, and we try to produce a witty, amusing digest that takes precisely 1 hour and 10 minutes to read. And when you finish it, you feel like a prince. I know everything.
I tell you what, I mean, it really is fascinating. I mean, look at this. This is the main stories, faith-based revival, serious. It wasn't all bad. This is about Chicago's Film Museum of History. What the columnist said, editor's letter from William Falk. What's next? What's next?
Right.
And it goes on and on. I mean, it really is.
We even introduce something that I think is pretty terrifying as far as American publishers are concerned. And that's the page after that page, which is a map of an actual map of the world.
Oh, my God.
First of all, America, and then on the next double-page spread, you'll see the whole double-page spread is a map of the world. And everyone always tells me that Americans don't care what happens around the rest of the world, and I don't believe that's true.
Absolutely not, as long as you tell them stories.
And as long as you keep it short, snappy, witty, and amusing, and we're totally bipartisan.
How is it, though, that the man who publishes this magazine... Maxim.
Wonderful magazine.
Pretzel Sex.
Yeah.
Teleportation, living plastic, blah, blah, blah. Thou shalt not share an umbrella, 50 rules of the game.
Better one up the top right.
Tyson Talks, okay.
Tyson Talks, we're all ears.
Stuff.
Sorry.
This is another thing, sex with strange, blah, blah, blah. You know, the best cities in America for women. How does a man who produces this stuff, which is okay with me too, but produce this?
I love magazines.
Yeah.
The sole answer to that is I've been in love with magazines ever since I bumped into them professionally by selling them on the street in the King's Road when my hair was down to my pants. And I've loved them ever since, and I'll probably go on publishing magazines till the day I die.
Is it fair to say that publishing this, with the success of this, gave you the money and the comfort and the security to do this?
It would be wonderful if I could say to you, Charlie, you're absolutely right, but you know what? Wrong. I actually got most of the money from publishing computer magazines. And also because out of the computer magazines I invested in a huge American company which we invented called Micro Warehouse, which we've long since sold. But those computer magazines and that big company, Micro Warehouse, that gave me all the money to be able to publish whatever magazines I want. And The Week was one I wanted to publish really badly.
How long? Recent origin? Or?
No, I'll tell you the story. It's a wonderful story. A newspaper reporter, John Connell, in the Daily Telegraph in Britain, put his house on the market, got a mortgage, took all the money, took his wife and children and put them in a cottage in the country. She wasn't very happy. And he put all of his money on the table and launched the week. Everyone told him that he'd fail. I met him 6 months later. He was literally bankrupt. I had to virtually write the salary checks that minute without owning a cent of the week if we were to keep it alive. Since that time, it has thrived to the point where, as a 6th birthday present last month, the week's subscription, the number of paid subscribers in Britain, passed The Economist. That ain't bad.
No. Yeah, but here's the criticism.
Okay.
It's too short. It's too headlining. You don't really get the kind of in-depth coverage you get on anything.
It's a digest. It is true. It is impossible to deny the fact that it's a digest. But when you look at the number of places at which the full story is available, I think there's a place for an intelligent, witty digest, which becomes, most readers tell us literally, it's like heroin on paper. You get it, you get through it every Friday. The weekend's coming up, you know everything. We're not trying
to know everything, but you have a sense of what's
going
on.
You have a sense of everything. You're skating on the surface of life,
Yeah,
I accept. But at least you don't look like an idiot.
Well, that's right. It's not at least something you can refer to.
No.
And here's the great thing. If you want to know more, you know the kind of thing you want to know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the
Sure.
sense of curiosity will take you to know more about the subjects you really find you're interested in.
Sure.
Whatever the story is, you can go to the New York
Absolutely.
Times, or you can go to
Absolutely.
News Weekly.
We give the web. We give the web URLs of every single newspaper from which we've helped condense things in every issue of the week on the back page. So if you want those full stories, you go straight up to their websites, and basically it's a celebration of the fantastic newspaper culture that exists in America and exists in Britain.
Would you like to own a great newspaper?
Do you know, I think
like
that would
Rupert
be
Murdoch
a very,
came to
very
London.
dangerous thing for me to do.
Why?
Because it's whenever guys or women end up owning newspapers, you know, their prejudices are showing something furiously. I'm not sure that I want the temptation of all that, you know, power in my hands.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about
Oh, you
that.
really don't?
I don't think
you
I
wouldn't
want
want
that.
for Felix to have a place that he can sound off.
No, I sound off plenty as it is. I don't think I need to bore the rest of the universe with my opinions.
How about broadcasting?
Broadcasting is really interesting. It's something that I've never really got involved in, although I do have appeared on a lot of radio shows in Britain, and I enjoy radio very much. But we are now actively in negotiations, or discussions perhaps would be a fairer word, to create a Maxim channel here in America.
A Maxim channel?
A Maxim channel. Huge, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment and stuff. And that is fascinating to me. Fascinating to me.
To me too. I don't know what's been written about that, but would this be a cable channel? Obviously, be a cable channel, but would it also would be a satellite channel? Which more likely to be a satellite channel, isn't it?
There is a huge debate with the two very, very large organizations with whom we are in discussion. And one of them favors the former route, and one of them favors the latter route, and I've got no idea where we'll end up. But I do believe that in a year or so, there will be a Maxim channel, and I think it will be a knockout success.
What would it be like? I mean, what might we find on the Maxim channel?
That's kind of what we're figuring out right now, Charlie. You know, and if you've got any ideas, you know, put them on the back of an envelope.
Well, I mean, Tyson Talks. That's good.
Yeah, Tyson Talks will be absolutely great.
But I mean, you know, you've got to fill 24 hours. You know, it's 7/24 right there, 24/7.
It's 24/7, and you know, we're used to just coming out once a month, or with some magazines once a week.
How do you think you have gained the circulation you have with this magazine, when there is out there GQ, Esquire, Playboy's not your competition, is it, or is it?
No, it's
not. No. Who is it? I mean, what is it you know that has readers coming to your magazine?
The problem is, I am going to tell you, but the problem is that as I tell you, I know I'm not really I'm doing myself a disservice, but I'm going to tell you.
All right.
Basically, men around the world are pretty much the same. They have similarities that.
Do I want to hear this?
Yeah, you want to hear it. And women are too.
Yeah.
And the women have always had a wonderful general interest magazine press, an absolutely wonderful general interest magazine press. I mean, that literally stretched, you know, all the way from Good Housekeeping, you know, to Cosmopolitan and beyond.
Right.
Men never had that. And
Well, what would you call things like GQ and...
That's about, GQ calls itself a fashion magazine. I mean, it is a fashion magazine.
Okay. Well,
and basically there was never a general interest men's lifestyle book because conventional wisdom in our industry has always been the same on both sides of the Atlantic, and in France, and in Germany, and in Italy. You can't do it. It can't be done. It's got to be a car magazine, or it's got to be a guns magazine, or it's got to be a yachting magazine, specialist magazine. And I always thought that was baloney, complete baloney. And so in the end, what you've really got here is a general interest men's magazine. That is the truth of the matter. And of course, it's led by girls in bikinis.
Right. I mean, and sex sells. It's basically
sex sells for Gucci, sex sells for Ralph Lauren, sex sells for Calvin Klein, sex sells for Maxim. I'm not going to try
anybody
and be
who doesn't acknowledge that simply is fooling themselves.
They're just lying, basically, or fooling themselves.
Yeah.
To be kind.
Now, but sex sells in what way? And what's the...
Maxim
is it pictures, or people really want to read stories called...
You see, if it was just sex sells, then Maxim would have been done...
Positions.
If it was just that sex sells, Maxim would have been done by American publishers 15 years ago. The facts of the matter are that sex on its own often doesn't sell.
Right.
Certainly nudity and the kind of photographs that you'll find in top shelf magazines, if you want to call them adult magazines, if you want to call them that. That embarrasses a lot of people and everybody, and they don't want to be seen with it too much. Basically, Maxim is about an attitude. Humor is the thread that runs through the entire magazine. I noticed that in various women's magazines, they talk to their readers in different ways. And we realize that men talk to each other in one-liners, even as I'm sitting here with you.
Yeah.
Never met before. And what do we do before we go on air? We're sitting there talking in one-liners, because that's how men speak to each other.
That's right.
My best buddy in the world died literally in a hospital bed in my arms, shooting off a one-liner.
Yeah.
And this guy was dying. That's how men talk to each other, and what runs through Maxim is this thread of humor and one-liners and your tongue in your cheek, and it doesn't really matter anyway. It isn't that important. There aren't that many things that are that important. And it's witty.
Now, was Details an effort to match you?
It was. Details were not an effort to match us, because it came before us, long before.
Okay.
Details was an attempt. It was really a downtown New York, magazine for really hip people who are in the know. Right. You know, what's happening on the club circuit, who's doing what, who's wearing what, who's going out with what. And it kind of worked while it was an independent operation. And then it got taken over by a corporation. And once it was taken over by a corporation, it withered on the vine. It would be very hard to keep a magazine like that going in a very large corporation.
Here's what I hear you saying, though. It's got to have humor.
It's got to have humor.
Kind of a one-liner thing, but it's got to have what it really seems to have. Every great magazine that I've ever known has a editor with a vision, a sense of what we are, and an attitude. Yeah.
Let me just, of course, I would have to agree with you, otherwise I'd be the devil incarnate, but we do not subscribe to the philosophy of celebrity editors.
Yeah.
Magazines, for me, or at least at Dennis Publishing, whether it's Blender, Stuff, Maxim, whether it's Auto Express, whatever it is a group effort. And for me, the idea of the celebrity editor, America has taken the whole concept of the celebrity editor to the most ridiculous extremes now. Absolutely ridiculous.
Well, how many are there, though? Some of the women's magazines, you've got Tina Brown, and you've got Anna Wintour.
All I can say
I wouldn't call John,
Well, all I can say is that I myself certainly do not subscribe to the idea of the celebrity editor. I do not think that magazines are totally driven by editors. I think you need a great editor to lead a team, and it's the team that does it. Some of the best ideas in this magazine come from the youngest.
But without a great editor with a sense of who the hell we are, a team won't. A committee has never made anything happen.
No, I'm not saying it's a committee.
A committee didn't create Dennis Publishing.
It's not a committee. It's a team. There's a big difference between a team and a committee. If you've ever played sports, you'll know that.
No, I do. Of course I know that. But every team I've ever known has a leader.
Yep, and that's absolutely true. So far, Maxim has reached, the numbers of copies that it's reached, about whatever it is, 2.7 million now. And it's on its fourth editor. Explain? It isn't the editor. It's what lies behind the idea of the magazine. In fact, it's the readers, actually. The readers drive this magazine.
Agree. Ben, how silly it is for me to sit here and tell you what an editor's about when you have all these successful magazines and I don't edit a magazine. But somebody's got to set the direction of a magazine. You've got to say, this is what we are, this is a sense of it. Then, once that's done, you can shuffle in editor after editor after the ship is in the water and it's headed in the right direction.
I agree. What you need then is somebody who can keep the magazine fresh and keep it on track. But I don't subscribe to the idea that magazines are as good or as bad as their latest editor, which certainly has been the fashion in the last 10 years, magazines here in New York.
Blender. Just tell me about Blender before we talk more generally. This is Janet Jackson is on the cover here.
Yes, she is.
Yes, she is. The queen of pop is back.
Yes, she is.
Tim McGraw conquers country.
Yep.
Radiohead, there's a good story.
You know, it's an excellent.
Trying to get them on this program. We're not doing so well.
They're a great man.
They are. U2.
Yep.
Bonner was just here.
And it's a real interview. It's not just made up.
Oh, really?
No.
You don't make up interviews?
No, we don't make them up.
So you got a real
A lot of people do actually make them up.
Do they really?
Yes, they do. They put them together from the internet.
Do they really?
Yes, they do. It's just completely unbelievable.
So you actually sat down and had one of your great reporters sit down and talk.
I'm saying that this magazine is something. This really is something different. This is a try at something different. Basically, what we believe is that whilst there are some great music magazines here in America, and I would say the greatest at the moment, of course, apart from my own, is The Source.
You would say what?
The Source would be the greatest music magazine in America.
Explain that to me, because I'm not as familiar with it as you are.
The Source is
I'm not familiar with it at all.
Okay, the Source is a wonderful magazine, and you should certainly bring Mr. Mays, who invented it, onto this program. It's a magazine about hip hop and hip hop culture and stuff, and it's a brilliant magazine, and it's selling hundreds of thousands of copies. It is unbelievably successful.
Better than Vibe, better than all those other magazines that responded to the hip hop.
Yes, it is. In that environment, it's the best. But what we believe is that people don't listen to just one kind of music. We actually believe that they listen to all kinds of music, and that music, music today is very fragmented and fractured, which is why we chose the name Blender, and why you've got a country artist in there, why you've got Janet Jackson in there, why you've got U2 in there,
Radiohead.
Exactly, all kinds of there's Weezer in there. I bet you never even heard of Weezer.
No, I haven't.
Well, I consider
Death, Madness, Pocket Protectors.
There you go. Well, that's a bit of Maxim. We couldn't help that. That just slipped in.
Dr. Dre, Motley Crue, Elvis.
Motley Crue, Elvis. Absolutely.
Angelina Jolie. What does she have to do with music?
Well, she's trying.
So this story, she'll get you. The Source. Is that the name of the magazine?
That's the name of the magazine.
You don't own this magazine.
I don't own it at all.
You have no interest in it.
I'm not shilling for anybody. This guy is just a brilliant guy, Mr. Mays, who created this magazine, and it is a wonderful magazine. I do not know him, but I admire him.
He will now, I guarantee you.
Okay. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Great magazine.
So what are you trying to do? Are you trying to beat him down? And
no, nothing to do with him. Because that's a niche publication, and what we're trying to do, however big the niche, it's a niche publication.
Right.
What this is an attempt, and I'll be very honest with you, to do what Rolling Stone did brilliantly 30 years ago. But my belief is, and the belief of many other people, certainly in my organization, that Rolling Stone has virtually ossified. I mean, it is an institution, and like all institutions, they become very, very uncomfortable as times change.
Why is that? Let's assume, I'm sure Jan Wenner would love to come on here.
Oh, sure, beat me up.
And
I'm
beat
sure.
you up.
And he would. I'm sure he would. And you're welcome, Jan. You're welcome.
I mean, he probably would say, are you crazy? We're constantly reinventing ourselves while we keep to the original.
Yeah, he probably would say that. But the numbers don't show that.
Are they losing steam on Rolling Stone?
It isn't great. I'm not going to sit here and diss. I'm not going to sit here and diss Rolling Stone, but it isn't great. It is not great at all.
So you think they're ready to be taken?
I don't know if I can take them, but I can give them a hell of a run for them.
Can you really? You mean Blender is going to be a challenge to the great Rolling Stone?
You believe it.
The Bible of rock and roll.
You should have heard what they said when we first launched Maxim.
What did they say?
I think that the editor of one of the magazines, who I won't mention, that you mentioned earlier on, that's been around for a long time, Men's Magazine, I think his prognosis was that we'd sell about 100,000 copies. That was, welcome to America, Felix. Not realizing that I've been publishing in this country for 29 years.
What have you been publishing in this country for 29 years?
The first thing I ever published in this country was I did a licensed publication for Steven Spielberg way back. I started out and for Jaws, the movie Jaws. And then I went on with my partners, Peter Godfrey and Robert Barton. Still my partners today, 29 years later. And we published magazines and books and all kinds of things for every movie that Mr. Spielberg made and every movie that George Lucas made, right the way through for years and years and years and years and years. So you went all the way through the Star Wars, you went all the way through the Indiana Jones, all the way through the Close Encounters and all that stuff. And I thoroughly enjoyed doing all that publishing. It was a great time.
You've made a huge amount of money.
Yes, sir.
You're like 50th richest person in the United Kingdom.
Well,
maybe higher. Are you higher than that? I mean, where do you think the number is now?
I don't know.
Oh, come on, be bashful for me.
I'm not being bashful. I don't know what I'm worth. If I knew what I was worth, I could tell you. I don't know. You know, whatever you say, Charlie.
No, I don't know either, actually. But I read you don't need to worry about money. And you bought whose house in Mustique?
I bought David Bowie's house in Mustique.
And who owned it before David?
No one owned it before David. Although I own David Bowie's house now in Mustique, I've got to tell you that house is still David Bowie's house.
Really? Because what he
put his heart and soul in that house, and it is a beautiful house. I think one of the only houses in the world that's ever been on the front cover of House and Garden and Architectural Digest. It is just a beautiful house. I admit that straight away. It's
why would David Bowie want to get? I mean, he and
all I can say is around the time that David, sold the house to me, he had married his wonderful new wife, Imam, and maybe that had something to do with it.
Really?
Who knows? I don't know. But
because he has an apartment here in New York. Spends a lot of time here.
Yes, he does. Yeah, he actually does.
Yeah, but the spirit lives there, huh?
If he walked into his house, even after the millions of dollars that I've spent improving it, he would instantly see his own imprint stamped there as firmly as ever. It's a beautiful it's built on Balinese principles.
Wow. What are Balinese principles? I don't know what they are.
Architectural principles. That is that the rooms are twisted so that air flows through them in certain ways, and the whole house is what's called an inside-out house, where most of the day you don't even realize there are rooms. Sometimes you're walking through rooms and you're not quite sure it is a room. It's only at night when all the doors are slid to keep out the mosquitoes that you actually realize this is a room. So it's these, and the Balinese have been living with these types of courtyard inside-out houses for hundreds of thousands of years.
How often do you go down to Mustique?
You're not going to like this answer. I spend 3.5 months a year in Mustique.
Do you really?
I do.
But you can do anything you need to do there. You've got all.
I can do anything I want.
You've got the internet. You've got computers. You've got all kinds.
I can do anything I need.
Satellites and everything you need to communicate.
I do have satellite there, and I can do anything I want there. But I spend 3.5 months. I figure it's not worth having a beautiful house like that unless you enjoy it. And I keep it open 11 months of the year. And I put 150 people a year through the house.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And it mixed down the road, or is he?
Yeah, mixed down the road. Yeah, we were climbing a flagpole the other day. I won't explain to you why. A fat, balding guy in glasses and one of the most famous rock and roll musicians in the world are climbing a ladder to go up a pole. I won't explain to you why, but we didn't fall down, and the insurance company didn't get hit.
You described the 4 horsemen of the magazine industry, and why are these significant to the future of the industry?
I'm not. I've given that speech on many occasions.
I know you have. That's why I'm bringing it up.
And those four horsemen, if I can remember them correctly.
I'll help you with them. The emergence of sophisticated digital media.
Right. Yeah.
Number 1. Environmental disapproval of the use of trees for paper.
Yes.
Growing functional illiteracy among the younger generation.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. The increasing cost of launching a magazine. These are the 4 horsemen of the magazine industry.
Right. Yeah. Those are the 4 horsemen. In the very long run, and I mean the long run, the ink on paper industry is doomed. There's no question about that. Anyone who thinks different has got their head firmly in the sand. But I did say the very long run.
Say that again.
Okay.
In the long run.
In the long run, there is no question that the ink on paper information industry is doomed. And entertainment industry is doomed. There's no question. I believe that in less than 50 years, even the selling of second-hand books there'll be a feeling about it similar to that with people who sell ivory objects now, even if they're 200 years old. That there will be strong disapproval, although it won't be illegal.
So what are you doing in anticipation of that?
My friend, the life I've led, Charlie, my life expectancy at the moment, I think, is about 15 years, and I'll be lucky to get that. I won't be worried about any of that.
You're not worried about that.
But after 50 years since the Second World War, of the most glorious summer that, the magazine industry has just had the most glorious summer that it could ever have. This last 50 years that just went by since the Second World War and the 30 years that I've been in it, we have now entered autumn. And anyone that pretends...
The autumn of our years.
there's no question, less magazines are sold in America every single year than were sold the year before. Less magazines are sold in Britain, in France, in Italy than were ever sold before. You know, there's no question about what's happening. It's not happening instantly. We're not just going to roll over and die. It isn't just going to go away tomorrow, but we have entered the autumn.
Okay. And there's reason to believe you're telling the truth and you know what you're talking about. Having said that, though, but you're creating new magazines.
Yes, I am.
Hello?
Sure.
Hello?
Sure. Well, Charlie, it's what I do. Whether your audiences were going up or down, let's hope they're going up, pray God, but whether they're going up or down, do you keep on interviewing people?
Yeah, of course you do. And you keep on creating programs. Of course you do. But in a sense, you're also thinking about all the future ways that you will communicate information. I am, and I'm sure you are.
Yeah, we have one of the busiest, MaximOnline.com. There's my only plug. MaximOnline.com is probably the busiest website for young men in America.
Okay, but
so of course we are.
That's an interesting question because we got to draw this thing to a close. That's an interesting question because, you know, if you look at what's happened online, the success of online newly created magazines is not great.
No, it's not.
You know, now you're suggesting something else, which really may be the future of online. It's how existing.
It's a brand extension. It should be a brand extension.
And brand extension.
Yeah. I mean, I adore ink on paper. I mean, you know, what do I do when I'm not doing all the things they say I do in the newspapers?
Yes.
I sit and read poetry. What do? You know, I sit and read and write poetry. I adore ink on paper. You know, one of my great heroes, you know, was the guy that invented paper in AD 105. You know, I don't want to think about the death of ink on paper, the slow death. Right. But I think I'd be a liar if I said it wasn't.
You'd be an ostrich.
I'd be an ostrich if it wasn't going to happen. Yeah, I'd be an ostrich.
What else do you want to do? What dreams do you have?
I'm going to become a famous poet, Charlie. I'm going to become a famous poet, Charlie. I've been waiting to do this for 30 years, and I'm going to do it.
How are you going to do it? You know,
I write great poetry. I have people who have been my buddies for many years and don't care that I'm a rich guy. I was with them long before I had anything. And I've tested this out with editors of very famous publishing houses. And they say, this is good. You could do this. I'm a little worried about it because in the tough world of commerce that I come from, the idea of sitting and negotiating across the table with a guy, you know, when you've been writing poetry, it ain't good, man. But I'm going to do it. That's one thing I want to do. Another thing I want to do is I'm going to cause to be planted the largest forest in England. That's another thing I'm going to do.
You're going to cause to be planted?
Yes.
Boy, that's a change, isn't it?
It is a change, but I've been fascinated by trees and obsessed by them. I even put together a magazine for the Tree Council in Britain called Tree News, and I adore trees. I've always sort of, and so I've been practicing planting tens of thousands of them for the last 5 years, and now we're gearing up to create this huge charitable trust in England, and we're going to create the biggest forest, broadleaf forest in England. We don't have we have hardly any trees in England. I don't know if you know that, Charlie. We're less than.
Well, I go out in the country.
We're less than 5 or 6. It all looks great because we plant the trees around the edges of the fields. But when you fly in a helicopter, it's a hollow square, man. So that's one of my big ambitions.
In contrast to stunning when you ride. I just came from Colorado. I was in Aspen for a week.
Right.
I mean, that's all you see are trees.
It's just completely. America has no idea how lucky it is with its high tree cover, which is a technical term for tree cover. You know, in Britain we're down to 5%. Germany has 23-24%. France has 22%. For a country to only have 5% of its land surface covered in trees is incredibly dangerous. Successive British governments have let us down since the Napoleonic Wars, been chopping them down and never replacing them.
What does it mean to you to have this book of poetry published?
It's going to be published, and it isn't going to be vanity publishing either.
It's not a vanity act.
It's not going to be a vanity act. I write poetry that has strict meter, that rhymes, that's easily memorable, and about subjects that make people laugh and cry. And I think what's happened in the last 30 or 40 years, you know, in poetry is shameful and disheartening, very, very miserable. No one can remember a single line of it. No one is interested in it. And I'm not surprised, unless you go back, you know, 40 years and backwards, and start tumbling into W.H. Auden and even back as far as Frost, and then even back as far as John Donne. Unless you go back there, you're not going to find anything that you're going to remember. That's shameful. We don't have to put up with that.
Who's your favorite poet?
My two favorite poets, I suppose I'd have to say A.E. Housman, Like a Shot.
Sure, right.
A.E. Housman, Like a Shot, and then I got a toss-up. John Donne on the one hand, and probably Robert Frost on the other.
Yeah.
Very simple stuff, really.
Yeah. Did you like The Invention of Love?
Yes, but with some reservations. With some reservations.
Felix Dennis, the man in charge, the man who created Dennis Publishing. Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you, Charlie.